Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Um, Today I wanted to talk about open houses. This will be part of a three-part episode. Because basically there's three general ways that Muslim communities, especially in the West or in other non-Muslim countries, try to give dawah: open houses, dawah booths, and social media. So, um, First, I want to start off with a story, and that is that a couple of years ago, I'm not going to say which city this was in. Um, you know, the Muslim community and the Muslim leadership at this mosque wanted to do an open house, right? So, they prepared a lot in advance. They spent a lot of money on food preparation, took a lot of volunteer hours, and they wanted to have it on a Sunday, sometime in the winter. Okay, so I was involved with this as well. And a couple of weeks beforehand, I noticed in the calendar that this open house was on the same day as the Super Bowl. So, I told my friend who was also a convert about this and said, look, like, it's probably not a good idea to have the open house on this particular day because no one's going to come. As Super Bowl, it's not a religious holiday. It's not, a national holiday. But in the Western world, even in Europe now, it's become a huge thing. It's the biggest sporting event basically in the world aside from the World Cup. So and it's not just if you don't know what the Super Bowl is about, you may see it like that it's taking place in the evening. So you may think to yourself, well, they can come to the open house in the daytime and then go to the Super Bowl afterwards. Well, Super Bowl is a huge event that usually people make plans for. People cook stuff in advance. They go to other people's houses. They may travel. And even if they're not involved with the Super Bowl, they have other things, to do because everyone else is, incredibly involved in it. Right. So, not the wisest choice to have it on that day. But the problem was, mosque leadership, they were mostly all immigrants. They weren't first gen or second gen or third gen. They were totally unaware of the cultural significance of the Super Bowl. So, we tried, me and a couple others tried to convince them, a couple weeks beforehand that, look, you need to postpone this. You need to even have it on another day because you're going to get very low attendance. And they wouldn't listen to us. So they ended up having, the open house in the Super Bowl, and as expected, nobody came. So, and I'm not trying to say this to backbite or to malign the brothers who ran this open house. May Allah reward them and us for our intentions. Um, but it just underlies the fact that having Islamic knowledge, it's incredibly important. It's essential. But it's not the be all and end all. You have to understand the culture of the people. Like if I moved to Japan, as a white Canadian convert and opened up a mosque and ran that mosque, I would know very little about Japanese culture. I would have an entire panel of Japanese converts advising us on certain things. What's you know are there any events coming up? What is culturally insensitive? And obviously you don't want to break any of the rules. Running a mosque, or you want to follow the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and you want to follow the rules of the Quran. But at the same time, you have to be aware of these things, or else it's going to result in a loss of resources. And indeed, they spent a lot of money on food when they had this open house, and unfortunately, it ended up being a big waste of money. Um, so that's an anecdote, but just in general, about my thoughts about open houses. So um, I don't want to say that there's no utility or no good things that can happen when it comes to open houses. Um, because I'm a living example. Because when I was a teenager, I went to a Catholic school, and my religion class organized a field trip to various places of worship. So we went to a Hindu temple, went to an Orthodox church, and we went to the mosque. Right. So even though I didn't end up taking my shahada that day, it did plant the seed in my mind. It did show me that these people, they're very welcoming, and I was very fascinated by the way the Muslims were praying back then. So there's definitely utility in that. I mean, especially for the youth, because the youth, they could be cruel sometimes, um, and it's good that they get that experience. So if you're a mosque that's organizing it for, like schools as like a field trip, that could be very productive. You're going to get kids who are rambunctious, but at the same time, I believe that the pros outweigh the cons. But that's a case in which you're you're basically forcing people to come. Generally, as a rule of thumb, non-Muslim Westerners are very reluctant to go into a mosque, right? In general, when you're having an open house event, now it's even less likely, because sometimes for many people, because some people want to learn about Islam in private. The fact they're having an event, it's a big gathering and everything, and it could be overwhelming, like, because you're gonna feel like outnumbered, because most people are gonna be there are gonna be Muslim volunteers. If you're a non-Muslim watching this, I assure you, like, stepping into a mosque, I know that it can be jarring to think about, some of the taboos you might break. But my experience as a Muslim of 20 years is that the overwhelming majority of mosques are very warm and welcoming. They're happy to have non-Muslims come in, so they can, they can learn about and teach about our faith and everything. So, there's nothing you need to worry about in terms of having a mosque. I mean, this video is more about what I feel about open houses as a whole, and what can be improved upon, and what are the limitations basically of having an open house. And definitely that's a huge limitation. The fact that um, you're not going to get many people who are going to want to go to an open house. Um, even if they have a positive image of Islam, it really, at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's not their turf, and they may not feel comfortable going to an open house in a mosque, right? Another option is having it at a neutral location. You could rent out a hall. I know the Muslim community I was a part of before that, they actually did an open house at a hall, um, at like a German club, and it was incredibly successful. I mean, like, they advertised it for a lot, and hundreds of people came. So I think that is something that I think Muslim communities should look at. Obviously, it's not a mosque, so people don't have to follow all these rules. It's not the house of Allah. So people are going to dress how they want. You're going to get people. It's not just about women not wearing hijab, but you wear, like, several non-Muslims were there, so some of them were wearing like nose rings, and some were dressed like punk people, stuff you wouldn't normally wear at a mosque. But like, the fact that it was at a neutral location, I think people felt a lot more comfortable going there. So that's definitely something that I think Muslim communities should look at. you know um, but at the same time, just the fact that you're having an open house, even if people aren't coming, it shows that that you want to do community outreach. So there is benefits that people don't see sometimes with having an open house. Um, so I'm not going to say don't have them. You know, I'm looking at it from a social psychological perspective, and like, the image of Islam, in the West and non-Muslim countries as a whole. Um, Now, I'm not looking at it from a fiqh or jurisprudence perspective. I know that there's, I think, one madhab that doesn't even believe in open houses. So I'm not here to argue about that. I'm not a scholar or anything, but um, it's just important to keep in mind. I think that open houses, they can be a piece of the puzzle in terms of like, the image of Islam, and giving dawah. They're not completely ineffectual, um, but they're only one piece of a very large puzzle. And what you'll find with open houses is that only people that have a very positive image of Islam to begin with are going to be able to venture to go to an open house, right? So the people who don't like Islam, or Islamophobes, or they're going to be far less likely to step into a mosque, right? They may approach a dawah booth, but with mosques, you're going to get a skewed version of the community that, in general, has a more positive image of Islam. And I think that's why there's also this huge disconnect between Islamic leadership and Muslim youth. Um, and part of that is because I think a lot of the Islamic leaders, as far as I know, in Canada, they don't hang out on social media. Um, they tend to stick to the masjid. They don't really involve themselves in, like, like non-Muslim environments for a good reason. I mean, they have an image to uphold. So usually their contact is only with non-Muslims, is the supermarket, and when they come to an open house. So if you're an imam, that doesn't go to university, that doesn't interact with non-Muslims on a daily basis, that doesn't have TikTok or Twitter, um, you might get a skewed version, a positive version of what non-Muslims think about Islam, as opposed to the youth. I mean, they're going to school and university, and they hang out on social media, and on social media you get a preponderance, it's skewed in the opposite direction. They're going to get more likely to see people who don't like Islam. So I think that's why there's like this kind of disconnect between what Islamic leadership believes about what non-Muslims think about Islam and the youth. Um, Now, I mean, like I said, I mean, so getting back to the whole thing about open houses, um, yes, there's utility in them. I'm not saying don't have them, but you have to realize that there are limitations to having an open house. Um, and really, on a final note, you may have some mosques that are just simply not ready to do an open house. I'll give you an example. The Darul Uloom, they're an Islamic organization, and their mosques are basically set up like boarding schools. They're for Muslim youth whose parents want their children to do a 6-year Islamic scholarship program. They have to learn Arabic and Urdu, and it's a boarding school, so they basically sleep at the mosque. And when you have so many kids around and everything like that, it can actually be a safety issue. So a lot of the Darul Uloom, they don't do open houses, and I can't blame them either. I mean, the children's safety, is of utmost importance. Even if they don't think that anything will happen, you're dealing, with like parents' children, and on the off chance that something may happen, they just don't want to do it for insurance purposes. Um, but at the same time, if the Darul Uloom is the only mosque in your community, I think it's you might probably want to think of alternatives. If you don't want to have it at the mosque, perfectly fine. I mean, that's when you think maybe we should have it at like a hall or a neutral territory. Yeah, so I mean, you have to think of some type of workaround. There may be masajid that don't allow women. Some mosques still in 2024 don't have a section for women, or at least not an adequate section. Um, so that's another thing. Um, and some imams just flat out aren't comfortable having open houses, for whatever reason. They may have some, like, uncles that or aunties that are very harsh. They're not used to seeing non-Muslims in a mosque, and you have a couple of these aunties and uncles in every mosque, and I know it's not the norm, but sometimes Islamic leadership are aware of these kinds of people, and they'll actually like try to sweep them under the rug before bringing them in. So yeah, and like on a final note, again, you want to follow the rules when you do like an open house. You don't want to, you want to, you're practicing Muslims. Like if something starts out on wrong, then it's going to end up wrong. As a general rule of thumb, I don't know the exact wording of the hadith, but if as a mosque, you don't want to break the rules of Islam. We follow the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the teachings of Islam. At the same time, you have to realize that there are some cultural sensitivities, and sometimes you can think of outside the box solutions, to get around these potential pitfalls. I'll give you one example. I was, working on I was volunteering for another open house in an undisclosed city, and they're very strict about following the rules. The Islamic leadership, they're saying don't shake the hands of someone of the opposite gender who's not a mahram. A mahram is someone who is like your immediate male relative for women, where like a brother or a father or things like that. So in Islam, we don't shake hands of the opposite gender. So they wanted to follow strictly this rule. Okay, fine. Now, as in the Western world, not getting a handshake is very culturally offensive. And compound that with the fact that some people get handshakes, or some don't, especially when it's men getting handshakes and women not getting handshakes. That's even more offensive. So, in the lobby of this mosque, they had one table set up to basically greet all the non-Muslims coming in. You know, so this one table was set up with two brothers, and me and a couple of other Muslims who were born Muslims, but they were first gen. They kind of understood the culture more than Islamic leadership. We said, look, like, not getting a handshake is incredibly culturally offensive, and we don't want to break the rules here. So what we should do is have two tables set up in the lobby. One table over here with two brothers, and one table over here with two sisters, right? So when non-Muslims come in, with their families and whatnot, at the very least, these women are getting a handshake. It's not totally what they're used to because they're used to, shaking everybody's hands, no matter whether, male or female. But in this particular case, everyone gets a handshake. So, that, like you're not breaking the rules, and you're being culturally sensitive as well. So great idea, but it was very difficult to try to convince, the mosque leadership, why we wanted to do this. Like they couldn't see it because they didn't really understand that, not getting a handshake is very culturally insensitive. So yeah, so bottom line, be aware of cultural sensitivities, but you don't want to break the rules of the mosque, or, we're practicing Muslims. We want to do things the right way. There is some utility in having an open house. It's not completely ineffectual, but you have to realize the limitations. Make sure you're not doing it on a day like the Super Bowl. And again, like, you want to be open and honest, and answer people's questions in the best way. But you have to realize that, when you do these things, yes, it paints the image that, we're open and honest, but you're only going to get you're not going to get a representative sample of the non-Muslim population at the end of the day, unless, like I said, if you have it at a neutral location like a hall, where again, you're not serving alcohol or anything. Those are far more effective in getting, tons of non-Muslims into your establishment, as opposed to just having it at a mosque. Okay, so that's it for today. Please like and subscribe to the channel. May Allah bless you all, and may Allah uh, help us reach, to this Ramadan, where we can get all of the blessings of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid and protect our brothers and sisters who are being oppressed, in the Muslim world, and may Allah keep them safe from harm. And that's it for today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.